Our Old Testament reading for Sunday, December the 28th, 2025, will come from Isaiah 52, verse 7 through 10. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who proclaims peace and glad tidings of good things, who proclaims salvation. This is the scripture for the Sunday after Christmas. Isaiah, I like to break up into 3 acts. The first act being the reason for the punishment, the Babylonian captivity. And that goes from chapter 1 to chapter 34. Chapter 35 and chapter 40, I believe, actually fit together with a small flashback to Kings that's inserted in there to give context. The second act then therefore goes from chapter 35 to chapter 55. This is the promise that God will send someone to bring back the people, to restore Jerusalem. And then the last part, 56 through 66, is a warning not to repeat the mistakes at the very beginning. Now, even though Acts is a condemnation of all the things they've done wrong, there is a glimpse, a promise of grace, and a little foreshadowing of what the second act will bring. And that can be found in Isaiah chapter 9, 2 through 7. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who have lived in a land of deep darkness, on them the light has shined. That whole Act 1 is a people in darkness looking for the light to dawn upon them. And of course we have the gospel reading from John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Jesus is the light who came in the midst of the darkness. But the darkness rejected him. Now the second part of Isaiah, the second act of Isaiah, then goes on to reference Jesus. It's one of the most referenced sections of all the Old Testament, is that second act of Isaiah. In fact, it begins with prepare the way of the Lord, make straight his paths. And then there are the servant songs that are throughout that section of Isaiah, ending with the suffering servant song after the text read this week. But before that text, there's also a reference to that suffering servant, where the suffering servant talks about Jesus' crucifixion. Isaiah 51, 22 says, "Thus says your Lord, the Lord your God, who pleads the cause of his people. See, I have taken out of your hand the cup of trembling, the dregs of the cup of my fury. You shall no longer drink it." This is the cup that Jesus sees in Gethsemane. For Jesus will drink the cup of dregs. Jesus will drink the cup of fury. He will become our salvation by accepting God's judgment as a suffering servant out of love, out of compassion. He will redeem us, for he is our salvation. When you take the cup that's being offered in chapter 51, verse 22, and when you take the suffering servant song, which begins in chapter 52, verse 13, and then goes on throughout chapter 53, where you have Jesus' actual death, his rejection and death. When you take both of those together and realize what is being done for us, then the section we have today becomes a precious gift. For behold, we bring peace and glad tidings of good things, who proclaims salvation, and that your God reigns. And let all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. Christmas is precious because at Christmas, God's promise to deliver us from our darkness, to deliver us from our captivity, to lead us back to a life of wholeness, of a right relationship, not only with God, but with each other and with all of creation. All of that promise began on Christmas morning. It will end on Good Friday, and the promise will be sealed on Easter morning. This is why it is good news. This is why it brings peace on earth and glad tidings. For true peace doesn't come from the end of war. True peace is when all of our relationships are restored. For when we are in right relationship with one another, with God, with creation, there's no need for conflict. We can live once again as Adam and Eve in the garden, where God will walk among us, and all tears shall end.